Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Marketing in the Madness. And if you've not been here before, hello, my name's Katie Street. I am your host for this podcast. And if you want to know the innovations that are driving marketeers forward and brands forward right now, you are in the right place. And as I do every week, I have a fantastic guest with me today. But actually today's guest is very relevant because his job title, which I'm probably going to get wrong, is VP of Global Innovation. Already wrong? Already wrong. Go on.
Global VP of Breakthrough Innovation at Diageo.
Yes. Okay, so Global VP of Breakthrough Innovation at Diageo. If you don't know, I was trying to look on ChatGPT, right, to work out all of the amazing brands that you guys have, and there are so many. But if you don't know some of the brands that Diageo own, I'm just going to list off some of them. Johnnie Walker, Guinness. We've just been having a great conversation with Guinness. We're going to share with you guys some serious insights, like best pubs to go and drink a Guinness in later on. Bailey's, Smirnoff, Tanqueray, Captain Morgan's. So many of my favourite drinks here.
Good.
Don Julio, Ciroc, Johnnie Walker, Red Stripe. Didn't actually know that you guys.
Not anymore.
No, okay.
ChatGPT duck a little in the past there, but
Chat gets it wrong.
Used to be ours.
Yeah, but you guys are doing some amazing things. So of course, because the podcast is all about innovation. Oh, I haven't actually introduced who you are apart from your job title. So Benny Lickfett.
Yes, hi.
Remind me of the job title again.
So it's Global VP of Breakthrough Innovation Digital. Actually.
Okay.
We made it even longer a second time around.
I like it. So let's start with that. What does that mean?
So what does it?
What does that very cool job title mean?
It's a big title, isn't it? And there are a lot of things like breakthrough and digital in it that most people don't know what the day-to-day means. But I sit in a team called Breakthrough Innovation. That's part of our innovation organization. So we have an innovation team that used to mainly focus on the great liquids in the bottle. So if there was a Gordon's that we turned into a Gordon's non-alc, that team would cover that. But we're now looking at that a lot broader and really looking beyond the bottle. And my team, the Breakthrough Innovation team, we look at any areas where we might not have the capabilities at the moment, where we see a rapid change in consumer behavior, or we see a rapid change in the external environment. And we then try to think big about what are the focus opportunities, but experiment, test, do rapid experimentation to get the evidence to understand what are some of the new solutions we need to build and how do we scale those.
Amazing. I mean, what a fantastic space to work in, especially like today as it stands now, because I think the world of digital, well, I mean, the world is digital. So not even saying the world of digital, like the world is digital. So being able to kind of test, learn, like I say, I think traditionally, and for those of you that don't know, I did used to also work in the FMGC space for probably one of the biggest Diageo competitors. What was it? Bacardi Brown-Forman, Pernod Ricard, Diageo. I was Pernod Ricard. And the world has come along so much since then. Innovation for us and our innovation teams back then were very much focused on product innovation. But now it goes so much wider than that because, more than ever, a lot of the brands have their own D2C. A lot of the brands, are exploring totally new digital realms that didn't even exist. Yeah. I mean, we were just saying, like, when I worked at Pernod, I remember Facebook launching. I remember us actually doing a launch party for like MySpace. That it was there wasn't social media. UGC wasn't a thing. Like, the world has changed so dramatically. So I think the opportunities to innovate are more than ever. You guys have got a task on your hands.
Yeah.
Let's get really practical. So for you guys right now and you and your role, what are some of the focus areas that you're really driving testing innovation, and what does that look like? If you can give, I'm always cheeky and I like to ask the cheeky questions, but if you can give any live examples of cool things you're doing with certain brands and how that works, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, happy to give some examples. And exactly like you said, we have these fantastic iconic brands. If you think of a Guinness or Johnnie Walker that are over 200 years old, and the liquid itself is still the beautiful same liquid, but the way that consumers celebrate, the way that they search for our brands or buy our brands or share them, the moment of occasion, all that changes. And we just need to ensure that we're still relevant in that space. So we often look at what emerging technologies are shifting the way consumers might go about that. now, as a lot of other companies, we're obviously looking things like AI and how that might change personalized journeys. So we've launched, for example, conversational AI interfaces. If you go to Seedlip, which is one of our non-alcoholic brands, you can speak to an AI-powered concierge or brand ambassador. And that's, again, brilliant for people who might not know how to navigate a category like non-alcohol. You might say, well, how do I mix that? Or if I want a lively dinner party and I want to serve a non-alcoholic option, how do I do that? And then you can actually build on that and ask the concierge saying, well, I only have wine glasses. What cocktail can I serve in that? So it creates a lot more personalized consumer experience. Some other areas where we have been exploring is also using AI for things like personalization. So with Johnnie Walker, we ran a trial where we allowed consumers to create their own unique bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label. So we actually trained a generative AI model on the Johnnie Walker Blue Label world, as well as on the artwork of Scott Needsmith, who's a Scottish landscape artist that we worked with a lot on Johnnie Walker. And then in our Princes Street shops, which is part of the Johnnie Walker experience in Edinburgh, consumers could decide if they wanted a painting that is all about landscape and romantic and dark or light, and play around with that and create their own unique label, which they printed on the bottle and took away. So if you think about sort of that emotional meaning, the experience, having that bottle as a collectible or gifting to somebody you care about, it kind of elevates that whole idea of what can a bottle be, how do you use that as a canvas, and how do you use technologies like AI to make that really relevant and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that for me was my whole world when I was back at Pernod all those years ago. But it was more about, at that time, we only had in real life experiences. We would, I think you referenced this when we were chatting earlier, moments that matter. And I think that's really important for, all brands, especially in the kind of drink space. Like what we were always trying to do is kind of, I don't know, be at festivals or events, or we did take that comeback tour at Live Aid or whatever it might be, where you're having that drink and that flavor of that drink and the smell and everything kind of it's kind of hits you, doesn't it? It's a bit like, oh, that reminds me of being in that moment, having that amazing experience. But I think what we're able to do now is create experiences in virtual worlds and in digital, and there's so much more that brands can do to create experiences with customers out, pre them engaging with the brand or drinking the brand. And I think that's what's really interesting, is like how you pull customers in and you get that brand advocacy through digital.
Yeah, and a lot of these things are still true, right? That we use sampling, festivals, experiential, but increasingly we can just be a lot smarter how we think about the whole journey, the event planning, the actual moment, the sort of post-experience engagement. And one approach that we take is just really looking at even established industries like concerts or sports. We see what is changing, what are some of the interesting disruptive players, technologies that are entering. We actually run within my team an open innovation program called Fusion, where we work with scale-ups and we pose specific challenges. And we actually just had one on this third space engagement. We had some brilliant companies, like a company called Together here in the UK, who's one of the biggest sort of event platforms where any host can go and they get everything from their music to bar to any requirement they have for a big corporate event or a festival of some sort. And we're working with them to see how can our brands show up in that space in a value-adding way, right? If you want a Guinness bar at your wedding, how can we enable that partnering with somebody like that? So, it's constantly about just seeing what's changing and how do we show up in relevant ways in there. And it's quite sort of a restless pursuit of finding these special moments.
Yeah, well, you've also started to answer a question I was going to ask is,
Good.
How do you uncover the right tech companies to use? Because there's always a tech company trying to sell something to you. And annoying, because actually sometimes they put you off wanting to work with them because they're a little bit of a salesy approach. But how do you go about finding the technologies that are going to enable you to get further faster? Like what are the things that you look for? How do you find them? Like I'm super interested in that, because it's hard, isn't it? Like
it's very hard. Yeah.
I'm always wanting to investigate new technologies, But then if someone tries to sell one to me, it's like, no, I don't want to talk to you, which is crazy, because I want to see as many of them as possible. So I'd love to know how, for such a big organization, when you're looking do you go, this is the thing, this is the problem we want to fix, how do we fix it? Or is it a bit more open than that? How do you go about getting there?
No, and it's a great question, because there's so much noise out there and it's so fragmented. So I think the starting point is being very clear about what is it you're trying to fix, what's the job to be done, right? And then we have a range of ways how we go about that. I mean, we do work with some specialist sourcing partners, especially if we go into very specific beverage technologies or a space of sustainability and others, where we'll have a sourcing partner to help us with that. We're also really active in the ecosystem. So, from my startup past, many people in my team as well will have connection to VCs, to accelerators, to others. So we have that extra degree of saying what teams, what technologies do you see out there that are really doing a great job at changing that or chipping away at this problem. And then we have our Fusion, our accelerator, our open innovation program, which allows us to put out challenges, and we get a lot of inbound requests and new connections through that as well.
Nice. So you're basically covering all bases. It's so hard.
We're trying to,
because in my head, I'm like, I probably go to LinkedIn, or I go to other people in my industry and say, have you, which platforms have you tried? But I'm probably trying to answer much more simple problems than you guys are, because you're really, especially in your role, you're really looking for what's next, things that people haven't even thought about doing yet.
Yeah, and I think an important part is part of the framing is not just what problem are you fixing, but it's also understanding what type of life cycle solution are you looking for, right? How mature? If it's really further out and it's just this sort of completely emerging category, you might literally deal with one PhD who sits somewhere who has a patent pending, and you just explore the territory. Now you need to manage that very differently than going to a scale up that is working globally but has never worked in Altbev or never worked with Diageo, and how you communicate that internally. When is somebody enterprise ready and a solution that is almost turnkey, or how much work is needed for that? So I think we've gotten better in framing that internally and understanding what are the requirements, how long is that path to scale, which in a company like Diageo, ultimately, that's what people will want to know. When do you get that scalable impact?
Yeah, I think that's the other thing is, especially because you guys have got such huge brands, the cultural attitude towards innovation has really got to be there as well. Like, you've got to, and I'm guessing a lot of the time when you're innovating, you're failing, right? Or which no offense, no, Benny, I'm sure that is not the case.
Oh, I have many failures.
But you have to, don't you? Like, you've got to try things, and you don't. And actually, I mean, I'm such a big believer in the things that don't work out, you learn so much more from.
That's it.
But I guess culturally, especially when you're looking after huge brands, Guinness, for instance, how do you get around that, like, within the business, and what does it look like when you're going, okay, I want to try this quite scary new thing that hasn't been done before?
No, you're right, and I think Diageo generally has a great culture for experimentation, and we run in open doors for most part in terms of trying to test new things. But at the same time, it's not Silicon Valley, right? That idea of sort of fail fast. People still, it's okay to take risk and bets as long as you capture the learning and you don't redo it. But ways we mitigate that is really think big, start small. So we ensure that we have the right focus area. We're going after big transformative opportunity, but then we find the leanest way to actually execute that. And that might be obviously looking at resources, what it takes, how much money do we need to invest. But we also look at the markets and the brand we work with. And we often have sort of global scalability in mind. And we have a portfolio of over 200 brands. But we might start with a smaller local brand that has more of a challenger personality, and that's better at getting live fast before we take it to something like Johnnie Walker or Guinness, where the reputational risk and the sort of media attention is just a very different frame.
Yeah, but that's great that you've got that portfolio of brands, right, that enable you to do that and like go to market with a small test before you. I mean, I kind of do that on my own business. Before we do anything for a client, I always test it on us first. Like, we use the technology, we test it, we make sure we're happy with how it works, and then out we roll it to our clients and go, yeah, this was brilliant. Off it goes to you guys now. You get to benefit from, the things that we love when we messed it up for ourselves. I think it's the same rules apply, isn't it? You've got to have a way of testing these things either internally, externally, or if you're lucky enough to have kind of these smaller brands that enable.
Yeah, and we obviously use, we have our own sort of digital sandbox environment. We can test things, but sometimes we do an invite-only beta where we just test it with certain people, or we just test intent or do some media validation. So we find different ways of doing it. And the other thing that we sometimes do is actually not have one of our brands, but doing a category play. If you think really consumer first, somebody might love cocktails or love the whiskey category and is not vetted to a specific brand as much. We've built something, for example, using machine learning, flavor science. So we actually partnered with a company called Vivanda that was a leading flavor science company. What they allowed us to do is basically ask any consumer 11 questions around everyday flavor preferences, right? Do you like banana? Do you like vanilla ice cream? Based on that, we could create a personal flavor profile and recommend you one of our 60-strong whiskey portfolio, one of the products in there, right? And that was all. The problem we're trying to crack was a lot of consumers, if you're new to whiskey, it uses a lot of codification and things that are not very relevant to people. If you don't know what it means if something is peaty or from the Highlands, how can technology make that more accessible without you having to go into a whiskey shop and feeling quite stupid about yourself because you don't know what the salesperson is talking about? How do you use tech to bridge that, right? And that we could own because it was a category play that just happened to include our whole whiskey portfolio. So these kind of avenues are interesting as well, because if they're not specialist teams like ours going after that, it's more difficult to get them live.
So now I need to know, which whiskey will I like if I like vanilla?
Well, you did. What's yourwhiskey.com? It's pretty easy.
Am I going to go check it out?
Through it. You should check it out.
We'll put that on the podcast. So if I go on whiskey.com, I can put in everything I like.
Yeah, what's yourwhiskey.com? You just answer the 11 questions and it gives you your number 1, 2, 3 choice with an analysis of your own flavor profile. And that's now live in 19 languages, 40 markets. You'll see it in airports. You see it embedded in retailers. So it has been great, and consumers love it because it's just such a personalized way to explore that category and just get smarter. And before you buy a 40-pound bottle of whiskey, you want that extra confidence level to know it's something you're going to like.
Why do you think the whiskey, it's a tough one, isn't it? Like, people either love or think they hate whiskey is kind of where I'm going with this. And I know from my days, we had in our whiskey portfolio, forgive me for swearing,
no.
But we had Glenlivet and Chivas. Yep. And we did a lot back then in terms of trying to make, cocktails maybe that were a bit sweeter, because I think especially us women often think the flavor profile is quite strong. We don't like whiskey. And it really changed maybe because I'm getting older, my taste profile is changing.
Yeah.
But it really, when I actually tried the cocktails or was educated on those brands, I was like, wow, like but there does seem to still be quite a bit of education happening. I think it's adopted by many who love it. And then there's a whole load of people that are like, oh no, I just don't like whiskey, but they haven't even tried it. So that sounds like the innovation that you've created is really trying to help that. But is that still the consumer behavior? Is it?
I think there's still barriers to overcome, and again, it's just such a industry with so much legacy and old codifications, and it's so complex, and it can be complex as a liquid. And I think the industry didn't do itself a favor for many years, where it was sort of the image of bunch of men sitting on a leather sofa in a library somewhere and having their whiskey, and it didn't help to make it more experiential. And there's sort of a whiskey for everyone, right? But you can mix it, you can dilute it with ice and water. There really shouldn't be rules around that, but it built up that unnecessary intimidation, right? And I think that's a role that technology can play. Another thing we did is for Johnnie Walker, we built a tool that uses web AR. So augmented reality, but through your browser. And we actually trained it to recognize over 3,000 of the most common types of glassware. What it allows you to do, if you have a bottle of Johnnie Walker Black at home, You can it can give you a cocktail recommendation. You can browse and create your own cocktail, and it then recognizes your glassware at home and tells you exactly how much to pour in and when to add ginger ale or garnish or whatever else it is. So it makes it more playful, more accessible, but you can do it without having a mixer at home or a shaker or any tools. So again, it just lowers those barriers to the category and makes it more engaging and fun for people.
What I love is how you're using the technologies like AR that we think, it's cool, but I don't really have a use case for that. I love it. Like, how do I? And you've made it a practical use case that is really helping break down some barriers when it comes to people, worrying or not knowing how to make a certain cocktail, or how much, like you say, if they haven't got a cocktail mixer at home, how much to pour, how much not to pour, what to even mix it with. Like, amazing.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges. There's, as you know, in marketing in general, people like a new buzzword. There's a lot of hype, and there's a lot of sort of tech for tech's sake and just innovating. So bringing it back to what is the problem we're trying to address here. What is sort of that unmet consumer desire where we can really add value in the journey? You need to always bring it back to that lens to make sure that it's really adding value, and that's the only way it can potentially scale and survive, right? But that is the mixture of not just doing that theoretically, but getting it in front of consumers and actually seeing what they say and keep iterating it. So that's what we try to do constantly to just ensure we're on the right track.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I love it. I want to come and be behind the scenes at Diageo for a day and see how this all works. Right, you touched on consumer there. Obviously, there is a lot of change. Like, I think there's some kind of stat that I've heard somewhere. You'll probably be able to give me the correct stat for this. Is it like one in four 18 to 25-year-olds don't drink alcohol? Or something like that.
That could be. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
We will check, guys, and we will write stat in here. I promise. But I mean that we know that the younger generations aren't. No, we're not going to. I'm not talking about under 18s here.
Yeah.
Legal age drinking and up. There has been some changes. Hence, in terms of how consumers want to live their lives, how we, I guess, I don't know, how we drink, how we enjoy alcohol. Yep. Obviously, there are very, very good and interesting kind of non-alcoholic versions now. I love some of the, really cool stuff that Seedlip have done over the years. I've followed that brand since it was an independent, actually.
Yeah, okay, great.
In fact, a colleague of yours, I don't know if she's there anymore, Hayley Jane Doyle, was once on this podcast. She was, I can't remember her job title now. Sorry, Hayley, if you're listening. Was at Seedlip, I think, when you guys acquired them. So it's been really great to see that. What are the kind of consumer behaviors that you guys are seeing that you're, trying to help people with as, I guess, our relationship with alcohol and how we consume alcohol and how we, find the right drinks, and because there is definitely a lot more awareness of our health nowadays. So I do think that it's generally changed consumer behavior, but certainly for the younger generations.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you guys as a brand or as brands across the board?
No, you're absolutely right. That's definitely a trend we're seeing. And luckily we're seeing consumers drink less but better. And that continues to be true. And some of that, absolutely what's driving that is a more sort of conscious, well-being focused, more balanced lifestyle. So really positive developments. One side of it is that it's a lot more experience-led. So consumers don't view sort of the drinking moments as it's not a transactional thing, right? It's really emotional. It's something that they expect more interesting storytelling, more involvement, more personalized interactions. So these trends are really interesting, something we want to cater to. There's some interesting sub-trends to that. One thing we're seeing in the trade specifically, the bar, much like coffee shops, is one of these areas where consumers actually want digital detox. They take the time to connect with others, and they want to do so in a really positive, uplifting environment. So how do we enable that and actually make sure that technology, for example, doesn't get in the way of that, right? And you just enable that moment, maybe by helping them find the right bar to go to, or helping them before to choose or connect with their friends and planning that and these kind of moments, but then get out of the way when they actually have that moment of connectivity. So we're seeing that, and we're seeing a huge trend to personalisation, but in the sense that consumers want more choice. They want better informed choices. They want augmented sort of layers to help them make those choices. So more seamless information at a fingertip, and that might be in the shelf or in digital commerce. But it also means that somebody who's having a Guinness on a night out now can do what's called zebra striping, generally switch to a Guinness 00, right? Because that's sort of the moderation they want to, the moderation option they want to have in that moment without losing the momentum of the evening or without sort of needing to break that pattern. It might feel nice to have that pint of Guinness, but they switch to a 00. So we're trying to provide more choice, more personalized recommendations around that, and more experience-led interactions. So I would say these are some of the key areas we're focusing on.
Yeah, it's super interesting, isn't it? Like, I find that so fascinating, like in terms of how, digital enables us to find the right brands, how we engage with those brands, because if I go back to how I used to choose my drink, I would just show up in a bar probably and choose. And it was, and I'm sure this still happens as well, that we were always trying to secure the house pour, like that we were the house brand, because that's, of course, then the more volume goes from whatever the house vodka is or whatever. And you look at the lovely back bar when you're choosing your drink. But I think now as consumers, we really buy into the brands. Like I'll go on to Instagram and check out Seedlip and look at all the recipes and engage with it and look at how people are using it, or not using it, that's the wrong word to use, but like how people are creating these amazing cocktails, because I want to have something that feels a bit fancy but don't fancy an alcoholic drink on a Tuesday night or whatever it might be. And I think that's been a real step change in terms of the amount of time as consumers we spend actually investing and understanding and buying into the brands more than we maybe ever did. We couldn't really, unless you went on your computer.
That's right. And
looked it up. Whereas now everything's at our fingertips. We can really, buy into a brand through their social media channels, through their owned platforms. So I think it's definitely changed. Like, I guess what you guys as brands need to deliver through those platforms. Have you seen any big kind of shifts, changes for certain? Are there certain brands that are more popular, that have a lot more website traffic than others? I'd love to know.
I think a lot of our brands manage to be incredibly culturally relevant through the right partnerships, showing up in the right outlets, and just being brilliant products that consumers really enjoy. So two that come to mind are certainly Guinness and Don Julio, for example. And if you think about Guinness, again, a brand that has an incredible heritage, hundreds of years old, but that also went through a phase where it probably lost that, where it was associated with St. Patrick's Day and rugby and Christmas only, but it wasn't all year round. It was also a drink that skewed a lot more male and older. And we really managed to rejuvenate that brand and really get consumers to try it who wouldn't fit into those traditional brackets, but also by showing up an interesting food occasion, ties into music and other relevant passion points where people just want to enjoy it. It really allowed us to highlight the incredible heritage and that uniqueness of that liquid. And also Instagram or Guinness happens to be a wonderful boomerang, Instagrammable, identifiable drink, right? That people love to post and share, and it really stands for that moment. So that's something we're really celebrating.
Yeah, I remember back was there an ad at one point where a woman was drinking it and it left like a...
Yeah, there are lots of iconic ads, and you had the famous surfer ad, and so it has that heritage of incredible creativity and relevance. It just it needs to be a 360 approach, right? Where that shows up through digital and partnerships. And now we're the official sponsor of the Premier League, right? Going out of rugby into those occasions. So it can take the brand to new places as well, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what's next for Guinness, because it's had such a revival I'm guessing it was, by the sounds of things, an intentional revival, because it's moved a lot in terms of its marketplace. So as the kind of innovation team behind it, because I think what's interesting about what you do is marketing and innovation is so intrinsically aligned, whereas traditionally maybe we saw innovation as something product innovation rather than specifically around marketing innovation. So was that well thought out? Well, of course it was. You're going to say, I was going to say, what's that well thought out? Like, did you plan? Because it feels, obviously from a consumer's point of view, it just feels like, oh my God, it's here, it's changed, it's now a much cooler drink than it once was. But I'm guessing internally at Diageo at some point you guys went, right, we're going to become a laggard if we're not careful here. Like, the brand is not stale, but it's a bit like a heritage brand, isn't it? Like, if you don't innovate and you don't do things differently to change your market perception, you are at risk. So I think there's a lot for in other sectors as well, for other brands to kind of go, do you know what, we've got to be brave enough to change. So I'm guessing there was an intentional strategy to move markets, and I'd love to understand, if you're allowed to tell me, some of the things that happened, because you've been at Diageo a long time, right? You've been 8
years,
part of this whole ecosystem and change for a long time.
And this is one I can take absolutely no credit for whatsoever.
Oh, then you do it. Just never on me.
Exactly. But obviously there was some brilliant colleagues on the brand marketing side who did plan this out, right? And there's the way we worked with different influencers, communities, partnerships to build that channel strategy. There was a lot that went into it, and it certainly was a plan based on the right insights and leveraging the brand. In addition, obviously, the innovation team did a great job in producing something like Guinness 00, which again helped us and has been a huge success, or the Guinness NitroSurge, which is a device that you use at home to create, honestly, a brilliant pint of Guinness. I'm a big Guinness drinker. I never had it at home. Now with the NitroSurge, I can create a brilliant pint at home. So
I really wanted to buy one for my brother for Christmas, and I think I left it too late and couldn't get hold of it.
If I find one for you for Christmas.
Yes, because he loves Guinness, and it's those kind of things that are making it, those little changes that mean you can now easily drink Guinness at home. Of course, that's going to heighten sales and adoption. And just a really simple thing that you don't necessarily think of that has totally changed the game for Guinness.
Yeah, not so simple.
No, of course, No, I mean, having the idea to do it, I think, in the first place.
And that's a strategy-led thing as well, right? You say, sort of Guinness is brilliant pub experience, but the home experience, there was the widget in the can, which was a big breakthrough back then, but it didn't quite live up to the pub experience. So how do you bring that into that channel and make it relevant? And again, something that consumers were telling us. They thought they would love to have a great pint of Guinness at home. So we had to think very differently about how can we go about that, because it's such a unique liquid and you needed the NitroSurge and so forth.
Love that. Very, very cool. And it would have been a very cool gift if I'd managed to order it in time. Okay, so we've talked about drinking Guinness at home. Not so much on innovation, but maybe it is. Where can people go to drink? And maybe not just Guinness. Let's talk about a few of your kind of hero brands, because we were talking about this earlier, guys. I kind of know some of the answers already. Where can people go to experience these drinks, like your favorite London pubs, bars, restaurants that really kind of bring the drinks to life? Like, I'm thinking cocktail bars, pubs for Guinness. Give me some of your best, coolest places.
So on the pub front, I mean, and I love London pub culture, and I think nobody obviously does it like the UK, and especially in London, there's so many great pubs. If it's for a pint of Guinness, there's the Toucan in Soho, which is a big sort of iconic establishment, fantastic pint of Guinness. And then there's the Devonshire, which probably a lot of listeners have heard of, which opened a little more recently, but has a fantastic pint of Guinness as well. And the whole place is just optimized, or it lives the brand. So you couldn't think of a better brand ambassador if you walk there, and it's a sea of black pints and a lot of smiling faces. So that's one we really like. We actually do have a very nice pint of Guinness in our bar as well at the office, but that's obviously not quite accessible for everyone.
Love that. What about cocktail bars? Have you got any recommendations on? Because I guess you guys, do you still work with this was a big part of my job way back when. Do you still work with a lot of mixologists and, I guess them kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible with some of these brands?
We also run World Class, which is a competition for the best barkeepers in the world that we have from, I believe it's over 50 countries or something competing. They all send their best barkeepers there. So there's incredible quality. And I mean, there's so many brilliant cocktail bars around the world. I don't really want to call out any specific ones on that front, but it's great to see how thriving that culture is. And I can tell you, and there are obviously a lot of drinks. My go-to is normally a Zacapa old-fashioned, which Zacapa is our Guatemalan rum, which is absolutely beautiful in an old-fashioned. Bit of that sweetness, bit of the orange notes to it. It's a good drink.
Yes, there we go. So we've got a cocktail recommendation and a fantastic pub to go visit. I'm very happy with that. So before, Benny, I let you go and enjoy the rest of your day in the sunshine in London, which does not happen often. Maybe we should go and have a beer at the Devonshire outside. Sounds good. Not a beer. We should go and have a Guinness.
Yes, for me, that's the same thing.
Same. What's on the horizon for you guys? What's your next challenge? Where are the focuses for you and the innovation team coming?
Yeah, so we have different hunting grounds we're going after. I can't really reveal sort of in detail what they are, but as we talked about, on the technology front, AI continues to disrupt. It's really interesting. We see some interesting technology emerging in areas like identity and membership. So obviously there's a big issue around trust. If you think about, again, how deep fakes and other things are really undermining trust. So there are new standards, something like FIDO, which is an identity protocol that a lot of the big companies are working on, try to get that identity. I think blockchain can play a role in that. So there are some things we see playing out more on a 5-10 year horizon, but lots of things around AI in the short term. And then I have a colleague in our team who just looks after our sustainability agenda. We're testing some brilliant things like circular system for bars. If you think about the fact that most bars is still single bottle use. In beers, you have kegs, but it's not a very convenient or environmentally friendly way to go about it to have individual bottles. So they've been trialing essentially similar to keg system, a system called Everpour that is a circular system and obviously has some great benefits from a sustainability perspective. So there's lots to go after. We're not going to go bored anytime soon.
Yeah. Oh, Benny, thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
Honestly, it's been super enlightening. I feel like I've really got back under the skin of the drinks industry and learned a lot about the amazing things that you guys have been doing to innovate. So a huge thank you for coming on and joining me today.
Thanks very much.